I'm just gonna start us off. Nah, no one's here yet. Yo, I said. No, I mean, I guess. I don't know if I need biceps to read. Maybe, who knows? No one's here yet. Excuse me? Listen, I said that before you showed up. There's a delay. Alright. Since you're here first. By the way, thank you so much, dude. For the reminders, for everything. I can't stream for too long today because I'm fixing to go to bed at like 10ish, 10:30. I have to wake up tomorrow at like, oh god, probably 4. I gotta leave the house at 4:45 for sure. I should actually make sure my alarms are on. But while I do that, you get first pick of what we're reading today. Anything you want. We could do bedtime stories, we could do spooks, we can do anything. Except smut. I'm not doing that again. Ever. I did smut on accident. There were some Lovecraft-inspired stories, and, yep. You want more Dr. Seuss? Alright, which Dr. Seuss? I might be able to find that. Yo, Chaos, what's up? You also get to choose what we'll read tonight, Chaos. Oh, you want me to read your thingy? Hop on Pop? Okay. Hop on Pop. PDF. Hop on Pop. Alright. I don't know why Hop on Pop is 65 pages, but apparently it is. We can, or we can do it bi-weekly. Totally up to you. Alright, so this is Hop on Pop by Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss goes hard sometimes, he really do. Hop on Pop by Dr. Seuss. Up, pup. Pup is up. Cup pup. Pup in cup. Pup cup. Cup on pup. Mouse house. Mouse on house. House mouse. House on mouse. All tall. We all are tall. All small. We all are small. All ball. We all play ball. Ball wall. Up on a wall. All fall. Fall off the wall. Day play. We play all day. Night fight. We fight all night. He, me. He's after me. Him, Jim. Jim is after him. See bee. We see a bee. See B3. Now we see 3. 3 tree. 3 fish in a tree. Fish in a tree? How can that be? Red, red, they call me Red. Red bed, I am in bed. Red Ned, Ted and Ed, in bed. Pat, Pat, they call him Pat. Pat sat. Pat sat on a hat. Pat, cat. Pat sat on cat. Pat, bat. Pat sat on bat. No, Pat, no, don't sit on that. It's a cactus. Sad dad, bad had. Dad is sad. Very, very sad. He had a bad day. What a day Dad had. It sounds like it would be good practice before reading an actual story. Works out the different sounds you make with your mouth. It really does. Thing, thing. What is that thing? Thing, sing. That thing can sing. Song long. A long, long song. Goodbye, thing. You sing too long. Walk, walk. We like to walk. Walk, talk. We like to talk. Hop, pop. We like to hop. We like to hop on top of Pop. Stop. You must not hop on Pop. Mr. Brown, Mrs. Brown. Mr. Brown, upside down. Pup up, Brown down. Pup is down. Where's Brown? Where is Brown? There is Brown. Mr. Brown is out of town. Back black. Brown came back. Brown came back with Mr. Black. Snack, snack. Eat a snack. Eat a snack with Brown and Black. Jump bump. He jumped. He bumped. Fast passed. He went past fast. Went tent sent. He went into the tent. I sent him out of the tent. Wet get. 2 dogs get wet. Help, yelp. They yelp for help. Hill will went up the hill. Hill will still. Will is up the hill still. Father, mother, sister, brother. That one is my other brother. My little brothers read a little bit. Little words like it. Oh, if and it. My father can read big words too, like Constantinople and Timbuktu. Say, what does this say? Si het miwe, papa pop, he 3 tree top hop stop. Ask me tomorrow, but not today. Authorized by HarperCollins Publisher Ltd. Those books probably don't make much sense at all without the pictures. Alright, can I see you? Oh, here's the second chapter. This one is from Chaos Dragoon. This is Harvester, Chapter 2. Dr. Sus. How to confuse and get your child to bed? Pretty much. I just remember it sounding comforting. 60-some pages went by really fast. I was surprised. I mean, it's not like each page has a ton of words on it, though. Let the chaos begin. Aw, hell yeah. Alright, here we go. Loneliness. That's what he had always known. For the longest time, he thought this was the norm. That this was what everyone felt. That loneliness was all he had at the time. But then it was replaced with pain. How he wished for the loneliness to return, to take his pain away. Every day the pain riddled his body with what felt like needles being pushed out of his skin. All he wanted was the loneliness back. He was stripped of it and placed in the cycle of pain. All because of her. 10 years ago. Rebecca stood outside the white room, chewing at her thumb as two soldiers wheeled out a gurney, with a blood-stained sheet over the body. A third soldier walked up to her and presented her with a clipboard. She quickly took it from him, scribbled her signature, and shoved the clipboard back to the soldier before storming off. The soldier watched her leave before he sighed and rubbed his eyes. He turned to the other two and motioned for them to follow him. They followed the third as they pushed the gurney with them. They rolled over a crack in the metal flooring, causing the gurney to stumble. When it did, a small child's hand slipped from under the sheet as blood began to roll down its fingertips. Rebecca sat at her desk for several minutes, simply staring into space, before she picked up the phone and began to dial. She tapped her finger as she waited for the other end to pick up. "Hey, it's me," she said before she continued. "I'm going to need—" She was cut off by the person at the other end. "Wait, what do you mean you're out?" Rebecca asked before she listened and added, "How the fuck are you out? That can't be possible." Her anger grew as she listened to the person on the other end. "And you didn't think to keep some for me?" Rebecca ranted before she continued. "The board is expecting results, and right now all I have to present is a failure." She rubbed her eyes as the caller cursed her out and argued with her. "I expect test subjects," Rebecca answered. She sighed as the person on the other end once again argued with her before she exploded. "Then make orphans." She slammed the phone onto the receiver, slunk back to her chair and rubbed her temples. "Oh, what the hell am I going to do now?" Rebecca asked herself. She sat there for hours, trying to come up with a plan. And after hours of thinking, she came up with nothing to fix her predicament. She sighed, and got up from her chair to head home. Rebecca slid her key card into the reader and waited. The reader beeped, and the door slid down to the floor. She stepped across the threshold and threw her key card on the table next to the door. She sighed and rubbed her eyes before heading toward the kitchen of her apartment. She opened the door to her fridge and took out a bottle of root beer before taking a seat at the kitchen table. She tapped her finger on the table and a slew of holograms appeared above the table's face. She took a large gulp from her soda before she began to swipe through each document. She stopped at one document as she felt something touch her elbow. She looked down to see a piece of construction paper had been slid in front of her. The paper had a crude drawing of two stick figures holding hands. in front of a smiling sun in the right corner, and a house on the left of the page. Above the tall stick figure with yellow hair were the words Mom, and the small stick had me written above it. Rebecca looked up to see a child who was no more than 5, with short brown hair and crystal blue eyes, sitting across from her with a large smile. "Do you like it?" the child asked. Rebecca looked at the drawing and couldn't help but smile. "Yeah, I do," Rebecca said before she placed it to the side and added, "I'm sorry, Seth, but Mummy's had a long night ahead of her, so I might not be able to read to you tonight." "That's okay, Mommy. I can have Mr. Teddy read to me," Seth said. Rebecca looked at him quizzically. Before she remembered the teddy bear she bought for him that could read any book just by scanning the cover. "Have you eaten yet?" Rebecca asked. Seth shook his head. Rebecca nodded and quickly got up and headed toward the fridge. She used the touchpad on the door and ordered takeout. 20 minutes later, a knock came from the front door. She paid the delivery driver before placing a styrofoam container in front of Seth and placing another in front of her. They both opened their containers to reveal a large portion of chicken and dumplings. As they ate, Rebecca continued to ponder on what to do. The board is expecting results, and according to Arthur, the next monster will attack in about a month. There's no way I'll be able to find my next test subject, perform the experiment, and then wait to if the vessel is approved. What the hell am I going to do? Rebecca thought. She looked over at Seth, who was shoveling a spoonful of chicken into his mouth, and thought of an idea. "Seth, sweetie, how would you like to help Mummy tomorrow?" Rebecca asked. "Even though he's 2 years younger than most of the test subjects, he's all I have," Rebecca thought. "Really?" Seth said excitedly as bits of food flew from his mouth before he added, "Can I?" "Yeah, but there's only one rule," Rebecca stated before she continued. "You can't call me Mummy, just Mrs. Cross. Can you do that?" "Yes, Seth corrected himself. "Miss Cross?" "Very good," Rebecca praised as she reached over and ruffled his hair. After dinner, Rebecca tucked Seth into bed and even read him one of his favorite bedtime stories. Jake and the Beanstalk? I think you meant Jack, unless there's a Jake and the Beanstalk, which there might be. After she'd finished, she kissed Seth goodnight, shut off the bedroom light, and left his bedroom door ajar so some of the light from the hallway could shine into his room. Seth rolled over and felt a large smile form on his face. He was so excited to see what was outside with his own eyes, and not have to use the television to show him what lay beyond his front door. Seth was jolted awake as the alarm he set the last night blared through his dark room. He yawned and quickly tried to silence it. Once he found the off switch, finally. He lay there for several minutes, contemplating getting up. Jake, Jack, same difference? Yeah, I'm not picky. He stretched and quickly got up, remembering he'd see firsthand what the outside world was like. After showering and getting dressed, Seth walked out to find Rebecca cooking breakfast. As Seth sat at the table, Rebecca brought him a plate with 4 slices of French toast, while Seth devoured his meal. Rebecca sat down across from him, sipping at her coffee. "This needs to work. It has to work. otherwise. Rebecca thought before she shook his head. No. Shook her head, rather. No, it will work. After Seth finished his breakfast, he helped Rebecca with the dishes and soon was waiting giddily at the front door. Rebecca placed her shoes on before kneeling to eye level with Seth before she asked, "Do you remember the rule?" "Yep," Seth nodded before he added, "I do, Miss Cross." Rebecca smiled, wide, and ruffled his hair before she took his hand and led him outside. A silver door slid down into the floor, revealing a large room with computers, strange machines, and in the middle, a holding tube that had what looked like pressure cuffs hanging from the top of the tube. Rebecca and Seth walked into the experimental room, as Seth looked in awe at the hologram screens and tube in the middle of the room. He was super excited after he left his home. But after seeing the fourth hallway and its light gray steel walls, his excitement slowly dwindled. Along the way, he met many passerby who would stop and talk with him. However, they all seemed sad when Rebecca talked with them and explained why he was there. Some even said he had a brave soul. He thanked them, even though he was unsure of what they meant by having a brave soul. "Ah, Miss Cross, we've been expecting you," a woman said as she walked up to the two. She was a short, thin woman with long auburn hair and lime green eyes. "Sammy, this is Seth. He'll be helping us today," Rebecca explained. "Miss Cross, can you help me with these calculations? Something seems off," a male scientist asked. "I'll be right there," Rebecca answered before she turned to Sammy and said, "Can you set Seth up while I go help Adam?" Sammy nodded, and with that, Rebecca left the two. Sammy knelt to eye level with Seth and introduced herself. "Seth, was it? My name is Samantha, but most people call me Sammy." She let out a sigh before she added, "I just want to let you know, you're such a brave soul to help with this." "Why is everyone telling me that?" Seth asked before he added, "Everyone I met on the way here told me the same thing." "I can't give too many details, but I can tell you that what you're helping with could save all of humanity soon," Sammy explained. Seth didn't understand what she meant by that, but he simply nodded. Sammy smiled weakly before she stood back up and said, "All right, let's get you hooked up." Sammy led Seth toward the large holding tube in the middle of the room. She helped him into the tube before the pressure cuffs hanging from the top slowly floated down. She placed each cuff on Seth's upper arms before she began to explain. "You're going to feel a slight pinch. After that, these cuffs will pulsate to keep your blood flowing normally." "Okay," Seth said, a little weary. He thought that he'd be helping by getting his mother and others food or water. He wasn't sure why he had to be put in this tube in the middle of the room. Sammy nodded before a hologram keyboard appeared next to the tube. She typed in a few keys before Seth jumped as he felt a prick come from under the pressure cuffs. They soon began to slowly pulse. "Sorry. We used to count down before, but we found others began to hyperventilate," Sammy explained. "Is he all set?" Becca asked behind Sammy, who made her jump. Yeah," Sammy stuttered before she cleared her throat and added, "We're all set to proceed." "All right, let's begin the procedure," Rebecca announced. Sammy nodded before she pushed a few more keys on the keyboard, and the doors closed. encasing Seth within the glass tube. Sammy followed Rebecca back toward a large computer console. As she did, Sammy asked, "He's much younger than the others. Are you sure a normal amount of the serum will do?" "I talked with Adam about that while you set Seth up. We both think the amount won't be too much for his body weight," Rebecca said before she turned to Adam and said, "Begin phase 1. Adam, a tall man with a 5 o'clock shadow, short brown hair and brown eyes, let out a sigh before he typed in a few keywords while saying, "No matter how many times we've done this, it never gets any better." "Oh, suck it up, Adam," Rebecca said before she added, "We've done this to countless orphans. No one cares if a few hundred orphans disappear within a year. Mandy will just write them off as either adopted by some made-up family's name or claim they were runaways." Rebecca then turned to Sammy and said, "Let Seth know what's going to happen so he's not freaking out." Sammy nodded and placed an earpiece into her ear. "Seth, can you hear me?" Sammy asked through the earpiece. Seth looked up in shock as Sammy's voice came from the speakers above him. He then looked out the room and nodded. Sammy nodded as well before she explained, "That's good. Now as for what's going to happen, what we're going to do is we're going to inject you with a liquid that will give us some test results on the human body. We find children to be more susceptible and easy to gather data from than adults. This liquid will cause your body to feel warm. It might be uncomfortable at first, but it'll only last a few seconds." Seth nodded as she explained, and when she was done, he gave her a thumbs up. He had no idea what she was talking about, but he knew his mother wouldn't subject him to something dangerous. Sammy grimaced slightly as she lied to him, and at his response to her explanation, she turned to Rebecca, who nodded. Sammy quickly typed in the code, and the black liquid flowed down from the ceiling and into the containment tube holding Seth. That black liquid flowed through each IV line into the cuffs in Seth's body. Seth watched as the veins in his arms started to turn black. His body felt warm, but not uncomfortably warm. It was like he was snuggled up in a warm blanket that had just come out of the dryer. "Is everything all right, Seth?" Sammy asked. Seth nodded, but then pointed at his neck where his voice box was. Sammy nodded and answered, "I can hear you if you have a question." "Are my arms supposed to turn black?" Seth said, showing her his veins and how black they were becoming. "Oh, don't worry about that. It's simply the liquid going through your body. They'll go back to normal after the procedure," Sammy said. Seth nodded and continued to watch as his veins slowly changed from blue to black. For several minutes, the three watched Seth, waiting for the inevitable. Adam gripped his console tightly as he waited. He knew what would happen next, and no matter how many times he saw it, he still couldn't come to terms with it. So many times he wanted to just run to the tube, pry it open, and save the test subject within. At what point he did, he was stopped and lectured on how this benefited humanity, but he knew what the lecture meant. Either you do your job, or quit. However, he knew quitting wasn't an option. The government wanted all this unlawful testing a secret, and he knew quitting meant death. Seth suddenly fell to his knees and clutched his stomach. Adam closed his eyes and let out a long breath as he tried to close his mind to the next part of the horrible situation. Seth? Seth, what's wrong? Sammy asked. Her tone was concerned, but it was all an act. She knew what was going on, just like Adam knew. However, she did her best to seem concerned for him. It's my stomach, Seth cried before he continued. It hurts. It hurts so much. Seth winced, and the pain intensified in his abdomen. The warmth he felt started to intensify. It started to feel like his skin was on fire. Seth sobbed as the pain intensified, and he added, My body feels hot. It feels like it's on fire. Seth got up and began pounding on the glass of the tube. I don't want to do this anymore, Mommy, Seth pleaded as he began to sob. Please let me out, Mommy. I want to go home. Tears began to roll down his face as he continued to plead with Rebecca. It's going to be okay, Seth. These are just the side effects of the liquid, Sammy reassured. Mommy, please. I want to go home. Seth pleaded before sharp pain rocketed through his head. He fell back to his knees, clutching his head as the pounding intensified. As he looked up at Rebecca, his right eye shifted from its crystal blue color to glowing blood red. Behind Seth, a large shadow figure started to slither up the back of the tube. Its body was like that of a stick figure. As soon as Rebecca saw this, she yelled, There, turn it on. Adam nodded and quickly typed in a few keys. A small spark of light fizzed to life above the tube before Seth began to scream as electricity surged through his whole body. Within seconds, he fell limply onto the floor of the tube. Vitals are low, but he's still alive, Sammy announced. Good. Get the transport crew here and take him to the holding cell. The next few days are going to be crucial. I don't think I have to tell you what happens if this fails, Rebecca said. Yeah, we know, Adam replied before he picked up the phone and dialed. Well, that was a first, Sammy said. What do you mean? Rebecca asked. We've never had a test subject cry out for their mother before, Sammy said. Yes, that is quite strange, Rebecca lied. Seth's fingers twitched as he slowly came to. His head was pounding as he sat up and looked around. His surroundings had changed. Instead of the holding tube, he found himself in a large white room. The bright white walls made it hard to see whether the room had a door or not. He slowly got to his feet and proceeded to feel around the walls, to look for a keycard reader or a doorknob. When his search turned up fruitless, he began to pound on the walls, screaming, Mommy? Mommy, where are you? He continued to plead for his mother to let him out. Mommy? Seth cried as he continued. Mommy, I want to go home. He began to sob as he slid down with his back to the wall and whispered, Please, I want to go home. He pulled his knees up to his chest and continued to sob. He stayed like that for what felt like hours, before the aroma of food caught his attention. When he looked up, he saw a tray of food sitting in the middle of the room. He quickly crawled over to it and saw 2 large helpings of meatloaf, with mashed potatoes and long stalks of asparagus on the tray. He looked around and began to call out once more. "Mommy, Mommy, where are you?" Seth cried. But his voice was hoarse and simply echoed in the room. His stomach growled as, once again, he turned his attention to the food on the tray. He swallowed hard. He swallowed hard before he grabbed the tray and sat cross-legged in the middle of the room, before he began devouring his meal. I don't like Rebecca. Rebecca's awful. I don't know too many people like Rebecca, but I know enough. Once he finished, he got up and began to examine the room. He ran his fingers on the wall, trying to figure out how the tray got in the room. When he turned back toward the tray, it was gone. Seth quickly ran toward where it once was and examined the floor. "Mommy, Mommy, where are you?" Seth cried out. He began to sob. "Please, I don't want to be here. I want to go home." He continued to cry for someone. Anyone to take him out of this room and bring him home. After what felt like hours, Seth's voice became hoarse. He finally placed his back against one of the walls and slid down to the floor. He once again pulled his knees to his chest and sobbed. "What did I do? Why did you leave me here?" As the days passed, Seth began to accept his fate. At first, he would continue to cry for someone to help him out of the room. When no help came, the only change in the room was the trays of food appearing. He began to lose hope, and over time, he would simply sit against the wall, staring blankly into space. One day, while staring into space, he heard something. Almost sounded like someone talking. Seth lazily looked around, not seeing anyone in the room. He let out a sigh, closed his eyes, and lightly banged the back of his head against the walls he sat against. "Doesn't that hurt?" the voice asked. Seth's eyes shot open as he looked around. He saw nothing in the room. He let out a long breath and rubbed his eyes. The voice came back again. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you." "I'm going crazy," Seth muttered to himself. "No, you're not," the voice said. Seth looked around once again and found nothing in the room with him. "I must be. I'm hearing voices," Seth said before he added. "And also I'm talking with the voices." "Well, is it all that bad? I mean, wouldn't you rather talk with me than sit here like a zombie?" the voice asked. "Well, you got a point," Seth said before he added. "Fine, I'll humor you. You got a name?" The voice laughed. "You seem rather different than the other kids," the voice said before adding. "You seem more intelligent." The smile cracked on Seth's face at the voice's compliment. "Mom had me studying at a young age," Seth admitted before adding. "It was the only thing that kept me from being bored. I don't have any friends." "And why not?" the voice asked. "Mom said I wasn't allowed outside the house," Seth said before he continued. "She said people wouldn't understand why she had a child." "And so she was hiding you?" the voice asked. "I guess, but I was okay with it," Seth said. He sat there in silence for several seconds before he admitted, although it was quite lonely at times. "So, you traded one loneliness for another," the voice said, alluding to the room Seth had found himself in. Seth hugged his knees and simply nodded. It was the voice's turn to stay quiet for several seconds before it added, "Well, there's one thing I can help you with." Seth looked up as though he'd seen someone standing there and asked, "How?" "I can be your friend," the voice admitted. Seth cracked a smile at the voice's proposal and nodded. "Friend? Yeah, I'd like that," Seth said before he added, "So what's your name?" The voice fell silent again, causing Seth to ask, Did I say something wrong?" No. I don't have a name," the voice said before he added. "When I was created, they never gave me a name." "Well, why don't you fix that?" Seth said before he thought of a name to call the voice. Something popped into his head and he blurted out, "How about Davis?" "Davis?" the voice questioned. "Yeah, there's this show I watch called Hypermorphing Troopers. There's these people who are given suits of armor to fight this evil alien queen. They also fight with giant robots. Davis is the Red Mantis trooper," Seth explained. "Ah, Davis," the voice said before it added, "I like it." "Cool," Seth said before he added, "So are you going to stay as a voice, or are you going to show me what you look like?" The voice fell silent before it let out a sigh. "I'm sorry, Seth, but I can't," the voice admitted before it explained. "You're not the first friend I've had, but whenever I reveal my true self, they disappear. I don't want to be alone anymore." "I won't leave," Seth said. "They've always said that, but they've never kept their promise," the voice said. "Come on, you can trust me," Seth said. "They said that too," the voice said. The two said nothing for several minutes before Seth broke the silence. "Then why ask me to be your friend?" Seth asked. When the voice didn't respond, he continued, "Clearly, you trust me enough to make yourself known." The voice stayed quiet for much longer this time. Seth pulled his knees closer to his chest and sighed. This was it. The voice would disappear and he'd once again be alone. "Promise me you won't run away?" the voice finally asked. Seth looked up at the empty room and smiled. "Where am I going to go?" Seth said as he mentioned the room. "Yeah, it was a kind of stupid thing to ask." The voice laughed before it let out a long breath and simply said, "Okay." Go Hypermorphing Troopers. Ah, hell yeah. Seth watched as his own shadow stretched across the room and began to crawl up the wall. It began to take the shape of a skinny, shadow-stick figure. Its lengthy arms hung limply on each of its sides. Seth stared in amazement before a smile formed on his face. "You know, I was expecting something scarier," Seth said before he joked. "Now I'm disappointed." The shadow figure laughed at his joke. "I'm sorry to disappoint," the voice said playfully before it asked, "So, are we still friends?" Seth smiled as he stood up and lifted his arm to present his fist to the shadow. "Yup," Seth said. The shadow began to peel itself from the wall and curled its clawed hand into a fist before placing it against Seth's. Its sphere-like head began to crack, and a jack-lantern-like smile formed on its face as it hissed in a voice that sounded like its mouth was filled with rust nails. friends. Present day. Seth's shadows expanded under him, before it began to spiral up from the ground and enclose him in a pitch-black egg. The egg began to hover a few inches above the ground before it began to pulsate. With every throb, the egg grew until it was about the same height as Komodo. Komodo slowly dropped the building in its mouth and turned toward the egg. A low growl emanated from the back of its throat. The spikes on its ball-shaped tail began to blink green, before the blinking accelerated and suddenly ascended up its back toward its head. Komodo opened its mouth and spat a green beam of light. The beam soared through the air, made contact with the egg before exploding and creating a mushroom cloud. The shock wave toppled buildings and shook the ground as the area around the egg was coated in thick, black smoke. Komodo lowered its body as it slowly unfolded its 6 spider legs. The spider legs suddenly jammed into the ground before forcing its body high into the air, just as a beam of white light shot from the smoke. It soared under Komodo before hitting the ground, swirling, shining into a small dot, and finally letting out a popping noise before a large area around it imploded onto itself. Komodo landed on the ground before watching the Death Hunter walk out of the smoke. The Death Hunter was 250 feet long, 100 feet smaller than the Komodo. From its large, round head to its arrow-tipped tail, with red spines going down its back. Black wings were folded on each side of its body, and pitch black skin shined in the sunlight. The bottom of its round head cracked open, and it unleashed a massive roar that sounded like a glove being pulled down a stringed instrument. Rebecca watched in the control room as events unfolded, and the Death Hunter revealed itself. One staff in the control room pulled her from her trance as they asked, "Ma'am, the army is calling. They want to know what to do next. They can't get in contact with Kane, and they want to know if they should continue attacking Komodo." Rebecca turned to the woman and said, "Tell them to retreat." Rebecca then turned back to the screen that showed the 2 monsters sizing each other up and added, "Let them fight." God, that's so chilling. It's so well written, too. Like, there's something really haunting about it. Like, that level of psychopathy. Just very well done. Alright. I have time for a couple more. If anyone is here, I will take requests. Let's use our own kids to better humanity. Classic sci-fi plot. Actually, I haven't seen that trope too much. Like, one's own child that they raised. I mean, I guess I haven't been looking very hard either. But Ireland? Let me get you Ireland. Alright. You want Ireland spooky or Ireland, like, bedtime? They're just random. Chaos? Alright, hearing none, we'll do the jackdaw. The jackdaw. Tom Moore was a linen draper in Sackville Street. His father, when he died, left him an affluent fortune and a shop of excellent trade. As he was standing at the door, one day a countryman came up to him with a nest of jackdaws, and, accosting him, says, "Master, will you buy a nest of daws?" "No, I don't want any." "Master," replied the man, "I'll sell them all cheap. Shall have the whole nest for 9 pence." "I don't want them," answered Tom Moore, "so go about your business." As the man was walking away, one of the daws popped out its head and cried, "Milk! Milk!" "Damn it," says Tom Moore. "That bird knows my name. Hello, countryman. What will you take for the bird?" "Why, you shall have him for 3 pence." Tom Moore bought him, had a cage made, and hung him up in the shop. The journeyman took much notice of the bird, and would frequently tap at the bottom of the cage and say, "Who are you? Who are you?" "Tom Moore of Sackville Street." In a short time the jackdaw learned these words, and if he wanted victuals or water, would strike his bill against the cage, turn up the whites of his eyes, cock his head, and cry, "Who are you? Who are you? Tom Moore of Sackville Street." Tom Moore was fond of gaming, and often lost large sums of money, finding his business neglected in his absence. He had a small hazard table set up in one corner of his dining room, and invited a party of his friends to play it. The jackdaw, by this time, had become familiar. His cage was left open. He hopped into every part of the house. Sometimes he got into the dining room, where gentlemen were at play, and one of them, being a constant winner, others would say, damn it, how he nicks him." The bird learned these words also, and, adding them to the former, would call, "Who are you? Who are you? Tom Moore of Sackville Street. Damn it, how he nicks him." Tom Moore, from the repeated losses and neglect of his business, failed in trade, and became a prisoner in the Fleet, and he took his bird with him, and he lived on the master's side, supported by his friends in a decent manner. They would sometimes ask what he brought. They would sometimes ask, "What brought you here?" when he used to lift up his hands and answer, "Bad company, by God." The bird learned this likewise, and at the end of the former words would say, "What brought you here? Bad company, by God." Some of Tom Moore's friends died. Others went abroad, and by degrees he was totally deserted, and removed to the common side of the prison, where the jail distemper soon attacked him, and in the last stage of life, dying on a straw bed. The poor bird had been for 2 days without food or water. He came to his feet and striking the bill on the floor calls out, "Where are you? Tom Moore of Shackville Street. Damn it how he nixed him. Damn it how he nixed him. What brought you here? Bad company by God. Bad company by God." Tom Moore, who had attended to the bird, was struck with his words, and reflecting on himself, cried out, "Oh, good God, to what situation am I reduced? My father, when he died, left me a good fortune and an established trade. I've spent my fortune, ruined my business, and now I'm dying on a loathsome jail. And to complete it all, keeping that poor thing confined without support. I'll endeavour to do one piece of justice before I die, by setting him at liberty." He made a struggle to crawl from his straw bed, opened the casement, and out flew the bird. A flight of jackdaws from the temple were going over the jail, and Tom Moore's bird mixed in among them. The gardener was then laying the plats of the temple gardens, and as often as he placed them in the day, jackdaws pulled them up by night. They got a gun and attempted to shoot some of them, but being cunning birds, they always placed one as watch in the stump of a hollow tree, who, as soon as the gun was levelled, cried out, "Milk!" and away they flew. The gardeners were advised to get a net, and the first night it was spread they caught 15. Tom Moore's bird was amongst them. One of the men took the net into a garret of an uninhabited house, fastens the doors and windows, and turns the birds loose. "Now," said he, "you black rascals, I'll be revenged to ye." Taking hold of the first at hand, he twists her neck and throwing him down, dies. There goes one. Tom Moore's bird, who had hopped onto a beam at one corner of the room unobserved, as the man lays hold of the second, calls out, "Damn it, how he nicks him!" The man, alarmed, cries, "Sure, I heard a voice, but the house is uninhabited, and the door's fast. It could only be my imagination." And laying hold of the third and twisting his neck, Tom's bird says again, "Damn it, how I nicks him!" The man dropped the bird in his hand, and turning where the voice came from, seeing the other with his mouth open, cries out, "Who are you?" To which the bird answers, "Tom Moore from Shackville Street. Tom Moore of Shackville Street." "Ah, the devil you are! And what brought you here?" Tom Moore's bird, lifting up his pinions, answered, "Bad company, by God! Bad company, by God!" The fellow, frightened almost out of his wits, opened the door, ran downstairs, and out of the house, followed by all the birds, who by this means regained their liberty. That's a cute story. I think I've read it before, but it's a good one. I also like the transliteration of "milk" before they fly away. Ren's a fan of that. Milk, 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 milk. All right. Enough of that. All right. Anyone have any more requests? Milk. Ren. Yeah. Hearing none, let's finish up. Let's finish up with a story. From Hans Christian Andersen. Whose work I've never read before. Let's do The Nightingale. In China, the emperor's palace was the most beautiful in the world. It was built entirely of porcelain, and very costly, but so delicate and brittle that whoever touched it was obliged to be careful. In the garden could be seen the most singular flowers, with pretty silver bells tied to them, which tinkled so that everyone who passed by could not help noticing the flowers. Indeed, everything in the emperor's garden was remarkable, and it extended so far that the gardener himself did not know where it ended. Those who traveled beyond its limits knew that there was a noble forest with lofty trees, sloping down to the deep blue sea, and the great ships sailed under the shadow of its branches. In one of these trees lived a nightingale, who sang so beautifully that even the poor fishermen, who had many other things to do, would stop and listen. Sometimes, when they went at night to spread their nets, they would hear her sing, and say, "Oh, is that not beautiful?" But when they returned to their fishing, they forgot the bird until the next night. Then they would hear it again, and exclaim, "Oh, how beautiful is the nightingale's song!" Travelers from every country in the world came to the city of the emperor, which they admired very much, as well as the palace and the gardens. But when they heard the nightingale, they all declared it to be the best of all. And the travelers on their return home related what they had seen, and learned men wrote books containing descriptions of the town, the palace, and the gardens. But they did not forget the nightingale, who really was the greatest wonder. And those who could write poetry composed beautiful verses about the nightingale, who lived in a forest near the deep sea. The books traveled all over the world, and some of them came into the hands of the emperor as he sat on his golden chair, and as he read, he nodded his approval every moment, for it pleased him to find such a beautiful description of the city, his palace, and his gardens. But when he came to the words, "The nightingale is the most beautiful of all," he exclaimed, "Oh, what is this? I know nothing of any nightingale. Is there such a bird in my empire, and even in my garden? I've never heard of it. Something, it appears, may be learnt from books." He then called one of his lords-in-waiting, who was so high-bred that when any in inferior rank to himself spoke to him, or asked him a question, he would answer, "Whew," which means nothing. "There is a very wonderful bird mentioned here, called a nightingale," said the emperor. "They say it's the best thing in my large kingdom. Why have I not been told of it?" "I've never heard the name," replied the cavalier. "She's not been presented at court." "It is my pleasure that she shall appear this evening," said the emperor. The whole world knows what I possess better than I do myself." "I've never heard of her," said the cavalier, "yet I'll endeavour to find her." But where was the nightingale to be found? The nobleman went upstairs and down, through halls and passages, yet none of those whom I had met had heard of the bird. So he returned to the emperor and said that it must be a fable invented by those who had written the book. "Your Imperial Majesty," said he, "cannot believe everything contained in books. Sometimes they are only fiction, or what is called the black art. But the book in which I have read this account," said the emperor, "was sent to me by the great and mighty Emperor of Japan, and therefore it cannot contain a falsehood. I'll hear the nightingale. She must be here this evening. She has my highest favour, and if she does not come, the whole court shall be trampled upon after supper is ended." "Ting-pe!" cried the lord-in-waiting, as he ran up and down the stairs, all through the halls and corridors, and half the court ran with him, for they did not like the idea of being trampled upon. There was a great inquiry about this wonderful nightingale, whom all the world knew, but who was unknown to the court. At last, they met with a poor little girl in the kitchen, who said, "Oh yes, I know the nightingale quite well. Indeed, she can sing. Every evening I have permission to take home to my poor sick mother scraps from the table. She lives down by the seashore, and as I come back, I feel tired, and I sit down on the wood to rest. And I listen to the nightingale's song. Then tears come to my eyes, and it's just as if my mother kissed me." "Little maiden," said the lord-in-waiting, "I will obtain for you constant employment in the kitchen, and you shall have permission to see the emperor dine, if you will lead us to the nightingale, for she is invited this very evening to the palace." So she went into the wood where the nightingale sang, and half the court followed her. As they went along, a cow began mooing. "Oh," said a young courtier, "now I found her. What a wonderful power for such a small creature. I've certainly heard it before." "No, that's just a cow mewing," said the little girl. "We're a long way from the place yet." Then some frogs began to croak in the marsh. "How beautiful," said the young courtier again. "Now I hear it, tinkling like little church bells." No, those are frogs," said the little maiden. "But I think we shall soon hear her now." And presently the nightingale began to sing. "Ah, there she is. There she is," said the girl. "And there she sits," she added, pointing to a little grey bird who was perched on the bough. "Is it possible?" said the lord-in-waiting. "I never imagined it would be a little plain, simple thing like that. She certainly has changed colours at seeing so many grand people around her." "Little nightingale," cried the girl, raising her voice, "our most gracious emperor wishes you to sing before him." "With greatest pleasure," said the nightingale, and began to sing most delightfully. "It sounds like tiny glass bells," said the lord-in-waiting. "Let's see how her little throat works. It's surprising if you've never heard this before. She will be a great success at court." "Shall I sing once more before the emperor?" asked the nightingale, who thought he was present. "My excellent little nightingale," said the courtier, "I have the great pleasure of inviting you to a court festival this evening, where you will gain imperial favour by a charming song." "My song sounds best in the green wood," said the bird, but still she came willingly, when she heard the emperor's wish. The palace was elegantly decorated for the occasion. The walls and the floors of porcelain glittered in the light of 1,000 lamps. Beautiful flowers, around which little bells were tied, stood in the corridors. What with the running to and fro and draught, these bells tinkled so loudly that no one could speak to be heard. In the center of the great hall, a golden perch had been affixed for the nightingale to sit on. The whole court was present, and the little kitchen maid had received permission to stand by the door. She was not installed as a real court cook. All were in full dress, and every eye was turned to the little gray bird. And the emperor nodded to her to begin. The nightingale sang so sweetly that tears came to the emperor's eyes, and then rolled down his cheeks. As her song became still more touching, it went to everyone's heart. The emperor was so delighted that he declared the nightingale should have his gold slipper to wear around her neck, but she declined the offer with thanks. She'd been sufficiently rewarded already. "I've seen tears in an emperor's eyes," she said. "That is my richest reward. An emperor's tears have wonderful power, and are quite sufficient in honor for me." And then she sang, more enchantingly than ever. "That singing is a lovely gift," said the ladies of the court to each other, and they took water in their mouths to make them utter the gurgling sounds of the nightingale when they spoke to anyone, so that they might fancy themselves nightingales. The footmen and chambermaids also expressed their satisfaction, which is saying a great deal, for they are very difficult to please. In fact, the nightingale's visit was most successful. She was now to remain at court, to have her own cage with the liberty to go out twice a day, and once during the night. 12 servants were appointed to attend to her on these occasions, who each held her by a silken string fastened to her leg. There was certainly not much pleasure in this kind of flying. The whole city spoke of the wonderful bird, and when two people met, one said Nightin, the other said Gale, and they understood what was meant, for nothing else was talked of. 11 peddlers' children were named after her, but not of them could sing a note. One day the emperor received a large packet which was written, "The Nightingale." "Here is no doubt a book about our celebrated bird," said the emperor, but instead of a book, it was a work of art, contained in a casket, an artificial nightingale made to look like a living one, and covered all over with diamonds, rubies, and sapphires. As soon as the artificial bird was wound up, it could sing like the real one. It could move its tail up and down, which sparkled with silver and gold. Round its neck hung a piece of ribbon, on which was written, "The Emperor of China's nightingale is poor compared to that of the Emperor of Japan's." "This is very beautiful," exclaimed all who saw it. And he who had brought the artificial bird received the title of Imperial Nightingale Bringer-in-Chief. "Now they must sing together," said the court, "and what a duet it'll be." But they did not get on well. The real nightingale sang in its own natural way, but the artificial bird sang only waltzes. "That is not a fault," said the music master. "It's quite perfect to my taste." So then it had to sing alone, and was as successful as the real bird. Besides, it was so much prettier to look at, and sparkled like bracelets and breastpins. 33 times did it sing the same tunes without being tired, and people would gladly have heard it again. But the emperor said the living nightingale ought to sing something. But where was she? No one had noticed when she flew out at the open window, back to her own green woods. "What strange conduct," said the emperor, when her flight had been discovered, and all the courtiers blamed her, and said she was a very ungrateful creature. "But we have the best bird, after all," said one. And they would have the bird sing again, although it was the 34th time they had listened to the same piece. And even then they had not learned it, for it was rather difficult. But the music master praised the bird in the highest degree, and even asserted that it was better than the real nightingale, not only in its dress and the beautiful diamonds, but also in its musical power. For you must perceive, my chief lord and emperor, that with a real nightingale we can never tell what is going to be sung, but with this bird everything is settled. It can be opened and explained, so that people may understand how the waltzes are formed, and why one note follows upon another. This is exactly what we think, they all replied. The music master received permission to exhibit the bird to the people on the following Sunday, and the emperor commanded that they should be present to hear it sing. When they heard it, they were like people intoxicated. However, it must have been with drinking tea, which was a custom. They all said, "Oh," and held up their forefingers and nodded. But a poor fisherman, who had heard the real nightingale, said, "It sounds prettily enough. The melodies are all alike, yet there seems to be something wanting. I cannot tell exactly what." And after this, the real nightingale was banished from the empire. And the artificial bird, placed on a silk cushion close to the emperor's bed. Presents of gold and precious stones which had been received with it were round the bird, and it was now advanced to the title of Little Imperial Toilet Singer, and to the rank of number 1 on the left-hand side. The emperor considered the left side on which the heart lies as the most noble, and the heart of an emperor is in the same place as that of other people. The music master wrote a work in 25 volumes about the artificial bird, which was very learned and very long, and full of the most difficult Chinese words. Yet all the people said that they had read it and understood it, for fear of being thought stupid and having their bodies trampled upon. So a year passed, and the emperor, the court, and all the other Chinese knew every little turn in the artificial bird's song. And for that reason, it pleased them better. They could sing with the bird, which they often did. The street boys sang zzz, 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 cluck, cluck, cluck. And the emperor himself could sing it also, which was really most amusing. One evening, when the artificial bird was singing its best, and the emperor lay in bed listening to it, something inside the bird sounded whizz, and then a spring cracked. Whirr. Went all the wheels, running around, and the music stopped. The emperor immediately sprang out of bed and called for his physician. But what could he do? They sent for a watchmaker, but after a great deal of talking and examination, the bird was put into something like order. But he said that it must be used very carefully, as the barrels were worn, and it would be impossible to put in new ones without injuring the music. Now there was great sorrow, as the bird could only be allowed to play once a year, and even that was dangerous for the works inside of it. The music maker made a little speech full of hard words, and declared that the bird was as good as ever, and of course no one contradicted him. 5 years passed, and then the real grief came upon the land. The Chinese were really fond of their emperor, and as he now lay so ill that he was not expected to live, already a new emperor had been chosen. The people who stood in the street asked the lord-in-waiting how old the emperor was, but he only said "Pooh," and shook his head. Cold and pale lay the emperor in his royal bed. The whole court thought he was dead, and everyone ran away to pay homage to his successor. The chamberlains went out to have a talk on the matter. The ladies' maids invited company to take coffee. Well, tea, really. Cloth had been laid down in the halls and passages, so that not a footstep should be heard, and all was silent and still. But the emperor was not yet dead. Although he lay white and stiff on his gorgeous bed, with the long velvet curtains and heavy gold tassels, a window stood open, and the moon shone in, upon the emperor and the artificial bird. The poor emperor, finding he could scarcely breathe, with a strange weight on his chest, opened his eyes and saw Death sitting there. He had put on the emperor's golden crown and held it in one hand, and his sword He had put on the emperor's golden crown and held in one hand his sword of state, and in the other his beautiful banner. All around the bed and peeping through the long velvet curtains was a number of strange heads, some very ugly, and some lovely and gentle looking. These were the emperor's good and bad deeds, which stared him in the face now that death sat at his heart. Do you remember this? Do you recollect that? They asked one after another, thus bringing to his remembrance circumstances that made the perspiration stand on his brow. I know nothing of it, said the emperor. Music, music, he cried. The large Chinese drums, that I may not hear what they say. But still they went on, and Death nodded to all they said. Music, music, shouted the emperor. Your little precious golden birds, sing, pray sing. I have given you gold and costly presents. I have even hung my golden slipper round your neck. Sing, sing. But the bird remained silent. There was no one to wind it up. Therefore it could not sing a note. Death continued to stare at the emperor with his cold, hollow eyes, and the room was fearfully still. Suddenly there came, through the open window, the sound of sweet music. Outside, on the bough of a tree, sat the living nightingale. She had heard of the emperor's illness, and was therefore come to sing to him of hope and trust. And as she sang, the shadows grew paler and paler. The blood in the emperor's veins flowed more rapidly, and gave life to his weak limbs. And even Death himself listened and said, Go on, little nightingale, go on. Then will you give me the beautiful golden sword and the rich banner? And will you give me the emperor's crown? Said the bird. So Death gave up each of these treasures for a song, and the nightingale continued her singing. She sung of the quiet churchyard, where the white roses grow, and the elder tree wafts its perfume on the breeze, and the fresh, sweet grass is moistened by the mourner's tears. Then Death longed to go and see his garden, and then floated out toward the window in the form of a cold, white mist. Thanks, thanks, you heavenly little bird. I know you well. I banished you from my kingdom once, and yet you have charmed away the evil faces from my bed, and banished death from my heart with your sweet song. How can I reward you? You have already rewarded me, said the nightingale. I shall never forget that I drew tears from your eyes the first time I sang to you. These are the jewels that I rejoiced a singer's heart. Now sleep, and go strong and well again. I'll sing to you again. And as she sung, the emperor fell into a sweet sleep. And how mild and refreshing that slumber was! When he awoke, strengthened and restored, the sun shone brightly through the window, but not one of his servants had returned. They all believed he was dead. Only the nightingales still sat beside him and sang. You must always remain with me, said the emperor. You shall sing only when it pleases you, and I will break the artificial bird into 1,000 pieces. No, do not do that, replied the nightingale. The bird did very well as long as it could. Keep it here still. I cannot live in a palace and build my nest, but let me come when I like. I'll sit on a bough outside your window in the evening and sing to you so that you may be happy and have thoughts of joy. I will sing to you of those who are happy and those who suffer, and of the good and evil who are hidden around you. The little singing bird flies far from you in your court to the home of the fishermen, and the pheasants come. I love your heart better than your crown, and yet something holy lingers about that also. I will come. I will sing to you. But you must promise me one thing. Everything, said the emperor, who, having dressed himself in his imperial robes, stood with the hand that held the heavy golden sword pressed to his heart. I only ask one thing, she replied. Let no one know that you have a little bird who tells you everything. It will be best to conceal it. So saying, the nightingale flew away. The servants now came in to look after the dead emperor, and lo, there he stood, and to his astoundment said, Good morning. Yo, Thunder Kitty. We're just wrapping up now. I have to go sleep. I gotta go sleep. I've got work at 4 in the morning tomorrow. And I'm also tired. Working weekends, yeah, it's bird work though, so it can't be that bad. But yeah. In the meantime, though, do not eat or drink any questionable substances. Make smart decisions. Do not die. Dying is absolutely forbidden. And I will see all of you wonderful people at a later time. Take care, guys. Uh-oh.